So thank you very, thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm surprised to see so many people. It's so early, and I'm really impressed because I saw the agenda for last night, social dinner. And I thought I will be here on my own, maybe with Björn. So congratulations to you who made it up this morning. So I'm Ute Gunzenheimer. I'm the Secretary General of the EOSC Association. We are a community organization, and we are playing in a European context. So this is not a technical science talk. This is really more on politics, on how do we operate in Europe in order to build and deploy the European Open Science Cloud. And then also, where could Galaxy sit there, and where do we stand in the current developments? And let's see which set of classes I need. So what is EOSC? That is briefly to be explained. Also, we are, let's say, getting our narrative straighter and straighter, and this is also good because we also have to take into account that the political scene is changing. And it's not only changing in Europe, it's also changing in other parts of the world. And then explain who are the actors who currently and who build together the European Open Science Cloud. It's the community, it's the European Commission, but also the countries. And then an overview where we stand. So what is EOSC? EOSC is for the digital transformation of research, and it addresses the problem that the amount of data generated or used in public funded research and innovation activities is growing exponentially. And a significant part of this data is not shared openly, is poorly annotated, is not machine readable, and often locked behind paywalls. And they have done estimations that it costs around 10 billion euros every year in Europe alone for not having research data fair. So it's a huge amount of wasted money. And that should be addressed with EOSC. But EOSC is not only an infrastructure, it is also a policy. And that's important to keep in mind. It's a policy that has been initiated on a European level, and it's a process to mobilize, align, and scale resources and engagement across Europe towards accelerating open science, higher quality, productivity, and reproducibility of research. So it has been basically started in the last decade on a European level, and now the member states, and that's important for getting consensus in Europe. And that's, I don't know how familiar the American or the international colleagues are here, but in Europe, the EU level doesn't have a science competence. So this is a competency that sits with the member states. So whatever Europe does has to be coming through incentives. And then basically the member states have to say, yes, we want to do that together. So it's not just Europe dictates. No, it's really a bottom-up collective process. And that is something that the Commission and Brussels has been working on since around mid of the last decade, 2016. Now, nevertheless, we need to build this infrastructure that's called EOSC Federation. And this is an open and trusted federation of collaborative, autonomous infrastructures applying agreed consensus-based EOSC policies and rules of participation combined into a system of systems to enable European research to store, share, process, analyze, and reuse digital objects. And talking about policies, that's the wrong animation, but anyway. So Emma, as I mentioned, I mean, the world is changing globally. And we just had recently elections in Europe, and let's say not as bad as we were worried about. And now the new commission will take its office at the end of the year. And in order to inform the next years, they have been asking experts to come up with recommendations. And one of those experts is a former prime minister from Italy, and he wrote his report called the Letta Report, just recently published. It's called Much More Than a Market. And in this report, he basically advocates for science, for research and innovation and education as the fifth freedom, as it was foreseen already for 20 years, to be a truly fifth freedom of the single market in Europe. Because in Europe, we normally know four freedoms. These are goods, services, labor, and capital. And now they also want that science, education, and innovation is a truly fifth freedom. Building the federation, what do we have to do? The EOSC Federation is to function as a network of interconnected and interoperable systems called nodes. And I think many of you are familiar with the nodes concept in general. These nodes can represent scientific disciplines or domains, national or international e-infrastructures, research infrastructures, and other entities. The EOSC Federation will offer a unified platform for European researchers to discover, access, and reuse fair data. And this is to foster collaboration, increases productivity, and ultimately drives scientific excellence. So that's what we are working for. And how is it supposed to work? Different research initiatives, infrastructures, and thematic clusters join the EOSC Federation as nodes. Each node contributes its own resources and tools, such as datasets, software, publications, and research services. And this is, I guess, where Galaxy comes in. Standardized protocols and formats ensure seamless communication and data exchange between nodes, and researchers can access a vast pool of resources from across Europe through their normal working environments if this becomes part of a node. And it is the European Commission who has now framed, also always keeping in mind how they can sell EOSC internally. Because, as I said, research and innovation, important, but in the hierarchy of, let's say, policy fields in Europe, maybe not the highest in the pecking order. And they have reshaped the narrative and the value proposition of the EOSC Federation. It's about economies of scale. EOSC nodes will take advantages of commonly pooled resources and functionalities, enabling them to focus on their core business. Interdisciplinarity, something you already practice in your community. EOSC will make a step change in fertilizing research that cuts across established disciplinary boundaries while increasing visibility and reuse of discipline-specific data and services. Research security, a big topic, especially in the new landscape. Researchers will find in EOSC a trusted and sovereign environment where they can securely store, analyze, and share their results and collaborate with their peers within and across disciplines. Enabling AI by pooling massive amounts of high-quality, fair research data, software, and compute, and by connecting to other common European data spaces, EOSC aspires to become a key driver of European leadership in AI for science. So that's what they want to basically, of course, tap into. And then policy implementation. Infrastructures and service providers that will enroll in the EOSC Federation will seamlessly comply by design to the EU's research and digital policies that are enshrined in the rules and policies of the EOSC Federation. So what's the message here? If you're part of EOSC, you already tick all the boxes that the EU might set up in order to dish out further funding in the future. So this is something that has been recently presented actually last week by the European Commission. And I think it's very valuable to, let's say, read into it the new keywords that are shaping the policy making on a European level. What are the benefits for researchers? Easier collaboration with colleagues across the disciplines and borders, faster discovery and access to relevant research data, ability to share and reuse data for new research endeavors, increased efficiency and productivity in research activities. And with this, the EOSC Federation is essentially a collaborative ecosystem that empowers European researchers to unlock more of their full potential. So you see in this presentation a strong focus on Europe. And I guess one of the key questions is where can a global endeavor come in here in order to contribute and to benefit from it? Well, we are not only a system of systems, but according to the EC, we are also a cross-cutting data space. So that's another very important, let's say, evolution on a European level is the establishment of common European data spaces. This is an activity that's driven mainly by, let's say, a department in the Commission. It's called DG Connect for connectivity. And it is mainly industry related. And they're currently evolving. I guess the furthest developed is the one on health. The others are also in the making. And there, EOSC is positioned as really the cross-cutting data space, and it's part of the digital agenda that was already set out in 2020. So also there, that gives us more possibilities of positioning EOSC, not only in the area of research, but also there when it comes to collaboration with industry and government-driven activities. Now, who are the players in all of this? We have 3 C's here: the community, the commission, and the countries. And we all play our role, so to speak. The EOSC Association is the representation of the community. And this is how it looks like when we meet. So we have just recently had our General Assembly that was held in Leuven in May, and the EOSC Association is a relatively new organization. We were only incorporated in 2020, so it's now 4 years, and the first year was pretty much not very active because there was COVID. So actually only 3. And our job is to provide a single voice for the advocacy and representation of the broader EOSC stakeholder community, to promote the alignment of European Union research policy and priorities with activities coordinated by the association, and to enable seamless access to data through interoperable services that address the entire research data lifecycle. So this is something that at the beginning, when this was incorporated, was not very obvious that the association would be able to do so. But I think the more we mature and the more EOSC, let's say, gets real, I think we can play a significant role in how to enable that. Our membership is coming from all across Europe. And I think in total numbers, I don't know, do you see? Here are the total numbers, which you cannot read. But what I can tell you is that we have 275 members and observers. And what is not visible on the graph now is the big pie part on the right are research performing organizations. So we have those 257 members and observers, and the majority of them are universities from across Europe. And you can see here in this heat map that it's mainly coming from the southwest of Europe. So the majorities are universities from Spain, from France, from Italy. And the further we go to the northeast, the less dense is the participation. What else do we see in this pie chart? I can only guess now, but 1/3 is service providers. And with service providers, we mean mainly e-infrastructures and research. Super duper, no, the research infrastructures. Still, it is so beautiful, but so unreadable, to be honest. So, and I guess something is others, but what's also important, one pie means 8% of our members are funding organizations. So we have national funders in our membership, which is very useful because they are the ones who then should basically implement the policy developments on a European level in their national funding schemes. And that's what we're now also working very intensively with them by establishing working groups with them. And we have more than 20 participants there. And it's interesting to see how they suddenly, when they talk about their problems, that you see, look, it's not all trivial, but maybe we can help them to solve them. And of course, it's a perfect route in order to advocate for our own objectives. Now, task forces. We have a very vibrant community. So we have 257 members and observers, but of course we have the whole community behind that. And in the first 2 years, 2021 and 2023, we were running 13 task forces with more than 400 volunteers, or actually, yeah, more than 400, yes. And it's amazing to see, I mean, what those people do, because that is all voluntary work. They do that on top of their regular work, and have participated more than 2 years in all those activities, published in total 27 deliverables, which you can all find on our website, and which were along the topics of metadata and data quality, research career and curricula, the sustainability of EOSC, and the technical challenges. So very big engagement, however, to be honest, difficult to manage. So that's why we thought, let's make it a bit more manageable by having less task forces and then working closer with them, because the problem of 13 task forces was, of course, also that we didn't have the resources to help them as good as we maybe should have. So we had a call open for 4 task forces on fair metrics and digital objects, EOSC technical and semantic interoperability, long-term data retention, and for the first time, a thematic task force, and that is on health data, in order to reflect really the drive that's going on relative to the European health data space and the collaboration with industry. And I don't know if we have the numbers here. No, but we had over 200 applications and almost all were accepted. Those 4 task forces have now started to work. Their job is now before the summer break that they organize themselves, meaning that they elect co-chairs. And then after the summer, they will develop a work program. And we hope that they will be in full swing no, well before the end of the year. So that is the work within the community, and I don't know if any of the European Galaxy members has applied or is a member of one of the task forces. If not, you can always come in later. Now, when it comes to the policy making and the funding, we have a partnership with the European Commission. The EOSC Association is a legal entity and the European Commission is a legal entity as well. And in order to give money to the community, it basically needed a framework. And this framework is called Horizon Europe Co-Programmed EOSC Partnership. And this is a 1 billion euros investment. The Commission gives, that's later, the Commission invests 490 million euros over 7 years. And we as a community, we also pitched in 500 million euros, saying we can do as good as you can, even better, with in-kind contributions in order to achieve our common objectives. Okay, and the basis for all of this is the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, the SRIA. And there we have 3 objectives that we work towards. The first one is open science practices and skills are rewarded and taught, becoming the new normal. The second one is standards, tools, and services allow researchers to find, access, reuse, and combine results, so the FAIR principles. And lastly, sustainable and federated infrastructures enable open sharing of scientific results. So those 3 objectives are being translated, and I just clicked through it because it's also very technical. They will be translated into what we call multi-annual roadmaps. So in order to give money to someone, you first again need a sub-box. And we call that a multi-annual roadmap, where I say these should be the priorities for a specific amount of years. In this case, 2, 2, 1, and 2 years. This is how it has been broken down. How does it work? This is just the that's the overview, saying we have a contract with the Commission. It's called a Memorandum of Understanding. It's legally not binding, but we work towards it from both parties as if it were, was. And our commitment was to come up with 500 million euros of in-kind contribution as additional activities. And there you can see what we have achieved so far. Our commitment was 500 million over actually 10 years. So from 2021 to 2030. And already in the first 2 years, we have achieved our 500 million. The forecast for 2024 is 335 million. So in other words, we could go home because it's actually an effort to set it up every year. But what does it demonstrate? It demonstrates that we have an engaged membership. And that's why we want to keep the numbers high. And yes, maybe not every euro is really accountable and traceable and so on, because it's all a guesstimate. However, what does it send to policymakers? It does say there is an active community, they take their own money, they invest it in policy areas that are relevant for you. And that's what we want to demonstrate. So I would hope that by the end of 2030, when we have to send in basically the final statistics, that we're, I don't even know where, but several billions, because that will help us to make the case for the future. Now, how does the collaboration with the Commission work, and why do I know Björn? So we have this Memorandum of Understanding, this contract. And then our right as community is that we inform the so-called multi-annual roadmap. And we do that through consultations. And then the community can say, yes, this is what should be on the agenda for the next 2 years. Then we hand it over to the Commission, and the Commission negotiates with the member states. Remember, Commission doesn't have any right in policy making on a European level. It all has to be done with the member states. And they then come up what we call a work program. And this work program will then be dished out to projects. And those projects are the so-called infra-EOSC projects, and it will be a total of 490 million in the end. And with that, those projects are supposed to build EOSC. Well, in order to make the projects work with each other, we have created what we call a vademecum, and that is something where we as the association, together with our own project, facilitate collaboration among projects, because we think it's important that the projects know of each other and that they find synergies and they work towards the same direction. And the next step is to fine-tune the MAR for 26 and 27, meaning another consultation. That's a slide from the European Commission, because they are the ones who make the calls together with the member states. And this is where they say, okay, we do have already for the work program 2025, we do have, of course, EOSC on the agenda. And there the headline will be enabling an operational, open and fair EOSC ecosystem. And what's important is this is the timeline. So the work program 2025 will only be finalized next year. Normally it would always be the previous year. But since we do have a new commission and a new, let's say, leadership in Europe, they said, let's wait until the new people are in place and they should take the decisions, the final decisions. That means we will then have the launch of the calls most likely, I would say before the summer break next year. So get ready for that. If you are looking for European funding, this is when it will be in the making. These are the colleagues of Björn, so to speak, in the landscape of EU projects. And whatever, we try to make them look alike, because we think it's important also to establish a brand that people can remember. Because in the past, everyone had their own logo, but if we want to make EOSC recognizable among so many initiatives, and you know that yourself sitting here in blue t-shirts, it's important to have a common branding. Now, we have invited the projects, and it was actually their own wish. We want to have more time in order to find out what can we do together better, where can we generate synergies. And we held a winter school, and it was in Thessaloniki at the beginning of this year, where people were forced to work together. And I assume, I mean, you take the same pictures, I mean, today when you go on your walk and so on. And this result was then also published, of course, in a nice report. But also there, Björn has taken a leading role in what we call an opportunity area. That's also voluntary work. No one is obliged, but it's an opportunity for collaboration and for basically being better than what is requested to do, and to get new opportunities also on the radar of the funders. And that's in the area of user and resource environments. And Björn, I just read out your slides in how you contribute with this activity to the EOSC landscape, to improve user environments, to increase EOSC end user across discipline, to leverage resource environments to offer versatile solutions through tools, services, and infrastructures available from EOSC providers such as Galaxy and EGI, integrate the EOSC Exchange horizontal service being procured in the EOSC EU platform, and we come to that in a minute, share guidelines for VREs and a common training framework across infra-EOSC projects, and finally, establish trusted VREs supported by relevant EOSC projects, and the others are called, for example, Entrust and OSCARs. So growing a community for the Galaxy by working together with other EU-funded projects. That's part of the strategy, also to gain relevance and visibility. And last week we were in Brussels, and that's how it looks like when we meet in Brussels, a bit more official, of course. But it's a growing community, and I think the people knowing each other, and you know that from your own organizations and your own way of working, the more you know each other, the easier it is to establish collaborations. A lot of information. Any questions so far? I'm not ready yet. Just questions, because it's a lot of EU lingo. Yeah, Frederick. No, it's just because there is more to come, and otherwise it might be a bit boring at 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah, indeed, a lot of information, but thank you for clarifying a couple of things. I mean, one question that already came up here is to what extent will then, I guess, the new calls also support mature communities like ours rather than doing something new, and always kind of
I actually
doing
forgot
it
to
as a
mention
side.
this number. Okay, so as I said, we are not part of the call drafting, although we started to do so, and not on the final negotiations. However, we have heard from the Commission they plan in 2025 to have a call on maturing the EOSC Federation, whatever they will call it, and the number I have heard is 40 million euros. 40 million euros means that you have several projects being funded under this call, and I guess it will be wide enough to stick enough different, let's say, activities in, because it is the interest of the Commission to show something, to demonstrate victory, if I may say so, because this activity has been going on since 2018, and it's time to show a result. Ne? So get ready. Ne? And I mean, in Europe, you always have to go through your program committee member to get the latest drafts, and then you start to build your consortium, I mean, half a year before even the call is being published. Ne? Anything else before I move on? No? Because indeed, yeah, over here.
So the very interesting part to me was when you mentioned that the task forces were completely volunteer driven, because that's entirely not sustainable. And it's also filtering in like who can participate.
So yeah, so the task forces indeed is a voluntary action of the association. The projects are funded by the Commission, they get money, they have to do a thing, and if they don't do it, the world will not collapse. But I mean, okay, it's a risk if you don't. So, and the task force is really where, I mean, I'm surprised myself, I have to say, but people are so motivated and driven in order to drive one aspect forward, because it's strategic, because the work of the task forces will feed into the next version of our strategic roadmap. And you can either turn left or right or continue straight away. And that's why they want to be part in the making, so to speak. And of course, it's also about visibility, about making connections and being there, so to speak. And that drives their engagement. Of course, not everyone is always there in every meeting. But now we had a call out. We had more than 200 applications, and those people had to really work for the applications, meaning a proper CV, a proper application letter, plus a signature from their boss. I mean, and they all made it on time. So that was quite a surprise to see the drive behind it. It's, I mean, we take it, of course. I mean, it's not sustainable in that sense, since they don't implement anything. They do the strategic thinking. So then in the context of the whole development, we need to work with the member states, because the sustainability of EOSC will be dependent on the member states. The Commission is the one who gives you the kick-up, the seed funding. They do that for whatever can be a very long period, but you cannot count on them that they will do it forever. That's why it's important that whatever we do it together with the member states. And there, of course, we will be diversity in Europe. So when we meet together, then we call it a tripartite governance. I think this word doesn't exist. However, it describes what it is. You have the representatives of the member states on the left, in the middle, the Commission, and on the right, the association. And usually it's quite serious when we see each other. So now we work together in this tripartite context. We, as the association, have a partnership with the Commission. As I explained it, we have to work towards it, 1 billion euros. The steering board is the representation of the member states and the associated countries, and they are called an expert group. That's just a technical term to allow them to meet regularly with the Commission. And when we all come together, which is only 2 times a year, then we are called a tripartite group. So not a group, but a tripartite event. this is not very operational, and we figured it out earlier this year, and that's why we have established now something that we call a tripartite group. And in this group, we have subsets of the above, the Commission, the Member States, and the EOSC Association. And now we meet every second week for 2 to 3 hours. So that's really a very different pace, but that also shows there's a real dynamic in the whole process. And thanks to that, we are now moving quickly. And what we want to achieve is we want to have a future post 2027 that's anchored on a European and a national level. So in 2027, the Horizon Europe Framework Program ends. In order to be in the next program in 2028, we started thinking about it already in 2022, and we are not yet there. So that means we need to keep on working because we have all those different parties we have to bring on board. And in order to make it easier for everyone to understand what we're talking about, we have split basically the to-dos into 5 different tasks, and the EOSC Federation being the task 2 being the most important for us. The funding for continued research sits in the other tasks, 3, 4, and 5, and all of this can be packaged either way, and how to best package it and how to give it a sustainable funding and governance model that is on our agenda right now in this tripartite context. As I said, we're building the EOSC Federation, and I don't go through this, I guess, in detail again, because it's too much information, and I have said that mostly, but what I want to say here is it was the association, meaning the community, and that's the good thing. The community can be a real driver. We published a position paper at the end of last year where we described what we think the federation should be and what a node should be. And maybe I go into the nodes because we haven't spent too much time on that. An EOSC node contains resources adding value to the federation, acts as the legal representative that can interact with EOSC governance and structure. And that is something where we have received, I think, the biggest concerns so far, because many activities that want to either be a node or be enrolled as a service in or on board as a service into a node are not legal entities. And that is something that I guess also you in your organizations need to think about when it comes to the further evolution. Offer interfaces that comply with the EOSC interoperability framework, control their own operations and resources, and ensure that policies are followed within the node. And they may vary in their local policies, the resources to which they provide access, and the infrastructure on which they are built. So that paper was published after a broad consultation with our own membership at the end of last year. And ever since, it informs basically the discussion that we're having with the member states and the European Commission. Indeed. So, and initiatives can be European, national, regional, institutional, or thematic, may join the EOSC Federation and become EOSC nodes when they meet the requirements listed above. We are fast, but others are fast as well. And that is, in this case, the European Commission's DG Connect. They are the ones who have procured the so-called EOSC EU node. And these are the main characteristics they are highlighting, but I think the key fact is that it will provide federating services for the future EOSC Federation. And they have not given it to a project, which is also a message. So they simply got a service provider doing it. The good news is it's a service provider or a consortia of service providers from the community. And they have a very aggressive schedule. They started the implementation in spring, and they're going to launch it in October now. And that drives also our pace, because we don't want to let it basically to the Commission to decide how this federation should be built. And that's why we make sure that we are keeping up with this pace, because we want to be in the driver's seat as a community and not let them do it behind closed doors, since this is a procurement and not a project. It's really a service contract that they're having, and they only need to present at the end the result and not how they got there. So For all of you who are in Europe in October, there is the EOSC Symposium in Berlin, and this is where the EOSC EU Note will be presented for the first time. We are leading the discussion, as I said, and we've been doing that also not only since the beginning of this year, we started last year, but really now we're working on a monthly schedule to come up with new evolutions or steps in the evolution. And there are two key things that we are aiming at. The one thing is we are now leading, and we have the mandate from the European Commission and the member states. We are leading on the development of the EOSC Federation Handbook. And this handbook looks like this. It has 5 chapters, and we want to deliver a chapter every month. And we don't write it on our own. We write it together with the community, meaning we have called for volunteers again volunteers, and we got over 30 applications, and they have already finished the first chapter. So the kickoff meeting was, I think, on the 8th of June, and yesterday they finished the first chapter that it can go into the review. And this we will do month by month with a break in August in order to have for November, when this tripartite event takes place again, Commission, Member States, us, we want to have the first version of this handbook. And these are the topics from the operational structure and responsibilities, the governance and legal frameworks, the EOSC platform, and the technical operations. We want to be the ones describing it. We get the input from the community and from the member states, from the administration. Nevertheless, we are always the one who making the first step, and that's the important thing about it. And it's again an aggressive schedule. The other thing is that we are leading on the description of the notes requirements. So what I've read out to you earlier, the bullet points, has been further defined now into the 3.5 pages document, which of course can be found on our website, that basically describes what do we expect from a node. And we only do not want to know theoretically what we want to expect from a node. We also want to know who wants to be a node or a service in a node. And for that, we have now, we have now called for interest, because we will decide everything together, which is good, with the member states and the Commission. But in order to find out what we're going to support and decide on, we need to first find out who's even interested. And that's why we have launched a questionnaire for everyone in Europe who wants to submit and express their interest, whether they want to become a node, not today, not tomorrow, can also be in 3 years' time, or a service in a node. And that is many clicks. The key message is the service open now. So we did have consultations or webinars to inform what it is about, and I will read the questions out to you. It's only 8 questions, I think. And organizations do have time until the mid of August, until the 18th of August, to fill in this questionnaire. And this will help us, not only the association, it will help the community, the Commission, and the member states to see what is the real interest. So who are the first ones who basically stick their neck out, as my boss says, in order to be the first nodes in the federation. And you can find the questionnaire on our website. It's important that you read the requirements paper before, because that will tell you, am I close or am I not so close to it? And there's one important, let's say, caveat to make. There is no additional funding available for the first nodes. So for those who say, yes, we want to be the first ones in this test federation that we're going to build, there will be no additional funding. So you need to have the manpower mostly available yourselves in order to be part of that game. That's the first round where they simply will test it, because someone has to stick the things together. And I mean, we need to expect that it simply will not work in the first attempt, and that you have to run several iterations in order to get over the finish line. So to manage expectations, but also to encourage people to fill in the questionnaire, we held these 2 webinars, and we had over 100 participants from across Europe. Now, what are the questions? And with that, I will close. Do you intend to offer your institutional resources through a future EOSC node of the Federation? So it's an intention. Do you wish to join the build-up phase with the intention to build a potential future EOSC node? Are you able to identify the legal entity that would assume legal responsibility for the potential EOSC node? So there must be someone who basically has a legal representation. Please list the resources your organization intends to make available via the node. That's a text, and each entry should give a TRL level and any restrictions that apply to use of the resources and describe their added value to the EOSC Federation. So why should it be there? Are all these resources owned, operated by your own organization? And if no, please indicate who is the owner or the operator. Please estimate when you would be able to start offering resources to the EOSC Federation. As I said, doesn't need to be tomorrow. What support competences training will be offered to the users of the resources made available via the potential node? What is the added value that you see for you and your users in contributing to the EOSC Federation? Because if you don't see an added value for your own community, then maybe not the right place to be. And please add any additional remarks you would like to make about the EOSC Federation, and you can also upload additional documents. So that is the questionnaire that's currently being out. It's widely promoted. So it's not only we within our community, but also the Commission and the member states channel it through their promotion channels in order to make the broader community aware of it and encourage people to fill it in, because only then we have a feeling of who is really interested. We will analyze all of this and provide feedback also publicly again in September with the outcome, and then invite a smaller number, and that is a decision that will be made in this tripartite, to join the first, let's say, round of candidate nodes. For everyone, and I talked about it already, who wants to get an update on the developments, is invited to join the EOSC Symposium. That is the community event. It takes place in Berlin from the 21st to the 23rd of October under the patronage of the German minister. It's co-organized together with NFDI, and I guess some of you are also in NFDI. It's the National Research Data Infrastructure in Germany, are also part of their projects, and we do that also back to back with a national meeting in order to bring the communities together where they are not yet together. And it is the place where the EOSC EU node will be launched. To conclude, the EOSC Federation is developing fast in the context of this tripartite governance. The community is leading on the development of the EOSC Federation handbook and the collection of interest of nodes and services. Galaxy, via the Euroscience Gateway project, is well positioned in the Horizon Europe EOSC partnership. A legal representation of Galaxy is invited to submit an expression of interest for offering a service in the EOSC Federation. I think that's something you should really consider. And then a significant amount of funding is expected to be allocated for EOSC Federation-related topics in the next 2025 work program. So get ready for it. Thank you very much.
So I think we have time for a few questions. Anyone?
One's still awake, or yet awake.
I think it's very interesting. So I'm from US, so forgive me stupid questions. I have actually two questions. One, are you in consultation with US and Australia because they already have similar infrastructures? And second question is that I heard you're going to require SLAs, which is, I mean, for us is a little bit unusual. And do you know what they will be and what happens if you don't adhere to these SLAs?
Yeah, okay. The last one is, I mean, this is the core discussion we're having regarding this, because it will require a legal representation, right, in order to sign such an SLA. And that is, I think that will be a mandatory requirement. I don't think it will go away. And that's why it doesn't mean that you yourself are a legal entity, but it means there needs to be a legal representation in order, yes, to take the complaints. And that will be, I'm pretty sure that will be required. So I guess that's also then an invitation to you to think about, if you're interested as a broader community, how could you facilitate that and meet that criteria? Yes, we are in touch with other parts of the world, but at the moment, I have to say, I mean, rather on a friendly level than on a strategic level, in that sense that we would really work together, because we simply don't have the capacity for that anymore.
Thank you.
Any other question from the audience?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ute, for the interesting presentation. I wanted to ask about the tier level of the services that you mentioned in your questions. Is it something there could be a minimum required for the services offered through the EOS nodes?
Now, yeah, I guess if you come up with a TRL level 1, it might not be that attractive, I guess. And in the end, from what I've seen so far, usually TRL levels are self-assessed, and there's no hard assessment from externally. So, I mean, I don't know, 7+, that would be my guess, you know?
All right, thank you so much.
Here's another question.
You already referred to the EU node and the procurement there. One of the topics is the standardization across domains. You're in front of a room with mainly developers who usually get a bit kind of anxious if they read that, because that could mean we need to change everything underlying. What does that mean? And then, I mean,
that means that we have to be involved, because I mean, this is really our biggest concern as the association, because we are not the one who are sitting in the middle of the procurement. We have not been part of it and so on. That's why we're now really, I mean, I wouldn't say working day and night, but in fact, we are doing that to make sure that we keep the pace of the Commission and their service providers, that they are not isolated, define what the future rules will be. That's really the game right now we are playing. And I think we positioned ourselves well. And that is really also not only the work that we're doing with the community in the Secretariat, but also our board, which is supposed to be not an operational board, is actually working pretty operational in order to make that happen.
and if I may follow up, what can we do to help you do that?
Participate in whatever kind of consultations, handbook writings. I mean, yes, it's all voluntary effort. The first thing is be visible and active in the project area. This is where Björn is and so on, and demonstrate collaboration and the added value of collaboration. With all those federation, handbook, and note developments, at least participate in the review, in the sense of when it comes out for consultation, don't ignore it. Make sure that your voice is being heard, because otherwise, I mean, for the Commission, it's easy. You have a contractor, you do your stuff, you tick a box, declare victory, and go home and move on to the next one. And then no one cares whether it fits anybody. And that's what we want to avoid.
I have another question. What can I imagine by the term service providers? And what is their, so to say, secret why they can keep the pace so fast?
Yeah, because they get high fines if they don't. So that's as simple as it is. It's a real, I mean, it's a contractual relationship under EU terms, Commission terms. That means you have your deadlines. And if you don't meet your deadlines and requirements, you as a service provider get a fine. It's what it is. And instead of 30 million, you might only get less million. Yes?
So it's companies.
Yeah,
so to
it's,
say.
in this case, it's actually not only companies, it's actually actors from the research environment. So it's not too bad. It could have been real commercial providers. Still, they need to prioritize their delivery. And it's all, you need to think it also in the political arena. We are in a transition year where we had just elections on a European level. There will be a new commission in place. People want to have something they can show to their new bosses. Ne? I mean, there will be a new commission coming in, and everyone wants to show, we did this. And this is also something not to forget about.
Any other question? Otherwise, I have still one. So Galaxy is a framework, and we have seen in Europe already 5 different national Galaxy servers building on top of national infrastructure. So do you think that we can actually also go hybrid, that a few of those national Galaxy servers will join a national Galaxy node, a national EOS node, but that we also have kind of a horizontal community Galaxy node that brings them together.
I would explore all opportunities just to have, let's say, many, how to say that, dogs in various hands, so to speak, so that you make sure that you're competitive with what you want to sell. And we have different paces in Europe. We have a very advanced development, I would say, because there are national programs and investments here in the Czech Republic, in Germany. There are other countries where they are not, let's put it this way. And this is something, make sure that you have your eggs well distributed in various baskets, and whatever materializes in the end, I mean, it's part of a constant process of being on top of the negotiation.
But I can have my eggs in different baskets.
I would say so, yes, because you're anyway not a legal entity, right? So, I mean, so
Yes, not yet.
it's not, in that sense, it's not competitive, you know?
Okay, last chance. Any other question? If not, then please let's thank Ute again.
Hello, everybody. So we have a special presentation. It's not quite a talk. It's to announce awardees of GXTX Foundation. I don't think, probably most of you don't need to be introduced to what GXTX is, but I will do this for those who are perhaps new to this meeting. So one of the founders of Galaxy was James Taylor. He started, so this all started at Penn State. James was initially a student with web, well, I guess I have to tell you the entire story. So Penn State, it's in the middle of Pennsylvania. It's between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So it's in the middle of the forest. But despite the fact that it's in the middle of the forest, it was a very important place for comparative genomics from about 1980s. The reason why it was an important place for comparative genomics, because there was a guy there named Webb Miller. So you probably all used BLAST. And so Webb is, without Webb, BLAST would not exist. And many of the tools that we use today, such as, for example, LASZ for doing, which is the first step for doing multiple genome alignments, was also developed there. And so Webb, around 2003, was looking for a good sysadmin. And he found one. And that good sysadmin was James. But James came from, at that point, so he had a degree in computer science from University of Vermont. And he worked in industry, he got sick of industry. So he was a very good sysadmin, but he wanted to actually do something real. So he wanted to do a PhD. And so eventually he became a PhD student with Webb, and where he did his dissertation together with Webb and Francesca Chiaramonte. So he was actually co-advised by two people. And around that time, I just came to Penn State as an assistant professor. And so we just met and we talked. And at that point, I couldn't get funding. You know, that's a problem sometimes. And another person at Penn State, Ross Hardison, who was also in all of these comparative genomics papers, if you go and look at them, he sort of gave this thing which was called Gala to me. Like, all right, I'm sick of it, go get this funded. And this is what kind of started as Galaxy. But I'm a biologist, I have no idea how to do anything. And so I explained to James that we have this thing, and somehow it started. And so there are a lot of people actually from the beginning of this process, for example, as Dan Blankenberg, who wrote all the first tools in the Galaxy and so on. So somehow, I cannot really tell you exactly how it started, but somehow it sort of started rolling, and Galaxy is Galaxy. But unfortunately, so James left us in 2020, and we wanted to ensure that everybody always remembers that the Galaxy originated with him. And one way of doing this was we established the GXTX scholarship program. It's GXTX Foundation. It has several goals, so we're sort of working through them. But one of our first ideas was to enable students to attend general data science and genomics meetings. So we started with that. And our first series of scholarships was to support people to go to Cold Spring Harbor genome informatics, biological data science, and biology of genomes. But then it seemed a little bit weird that we are not doing this for GCC. And so today is the first year when we are doing this for GCC. We have 6 awardees, but actually to introduce them, I wanted to call here the original James's lab as it was in Emory. So please, Darren, Jeremy, Sam, and Anis, come up here. So after Penn State, James did a postdoc at NYU, and then he had his first assistant professor position in Emory, and that was his lab. That's the people who you all know. That's the first. That's why Galaxy continues. So I will just ask everybody to say one name, and that person please come up. Well, just get up so everybody can see you. The idea of that is that, again, you are students, the awardees, so you need to schmooze with people here. And so people need to know how you look like. And so please use this opportunity, because the whole point of these scholarships is so people get to know you, and so then you can go ahead and build your career. So I think I'll start with Natalia. Natalia, if you're here, please stand up. So please take a good look at everyone and please talk to them.
I'm going to do more than Anton asked for. I'm going to say that I remember my first day at Emory when I met James, and it defined the last 15 years of my life. And so I hope that in similar ways, this conference defines your next 15 years. So Sweta, please get up to an round of applause.
Enes, that's a hard act to follow. So, you know, it's difficult to put into words what James meant to this community and what he meant to us personally, but he was a fantastic mentor, fantastic scientist, always a real pleasure to talk to, incredibly insightful, certainly one of the most intelligent people I ever met, but also incredibly kind and thoughtful about how he wanted to grow the Galaxy community. And so every year when I come, I enjoy thinking back, you know, and having the conversations and the reflections that we had the opportunity to have with James when he was still with us at these conferences and at other events with Galaxy. So that's kind of my personal memories of James. And so now I can go to Luca. Luca, are you here? Can you stand up? Luca is not here right now. Well, Luca is here with us in spirit. Hopefully we can find him at the conference and congratulate him on this fantastic accomplishment.
I'm gonna get choked up if I say too much. So, is Morgan here? James would love the conference, how it's going. So, Morgan, welcome.
Triali.
And Ahmed he broke his leg, so unfortunately he couldn't come. But anyway, these are the 6. So again, please take a look. And maybe you're looking for postdocs. I don't know, maybe you're looking for developers. That's a good pool to start looking at. So this is Foundation. It's run exclusively on donations. So if you can help us, please, you know, any contribution counts. So we're really, we're just starting. We have fairly ambitious plans on how we can grow and what we want to do. Ultimately, one of the James's ideas was also to do things like advising junior faculty, and we already did something in this vein together with NHGRI. Churja is there who can tell you more. We had a joint session which was fielding questions from young researchers to essentially how to obtain grant funding in the US, and we'll be doing this more at Cold Spring Harbor conferences going forward. The next scholarship that we will be announcing soon will be for biological data science, which will be happening this fall. So it will be announced on this website, so please check with this. I also want to use this opportunity to pay tribute to Simon and JJ Johnson, who JJ I mentioned yesterday. But again, this project is getting old, as I mentioned, and it's good that it's becoming mature. But as you get old, you also have some other things starting to happen, and both Simon and JJ contributed immensely to this, and we hope to do something, do similar things like scholarships in their name within this framework. So we're working with Australia and University of Minnesota now to do that. Thank you. So again, please don't forget to talk to the 6 awardees here, so 5 awardees who are actually physically here. Thank you.
All righty, we're full setup. The reason we have this picture up there, it's the vision of the future. These people can see the future. Ask them the hard questions and hope we get good answers. So we have representatives from the Galaxy community that have been around and have come from far and have different perspectives, right? So starting on this end, not related to the picture, but we have Wendy Bacon from the Open University. She, I think, has been on the stage a handful of times already. She's contributed tremendously to the single cell community, has been with the community for a few years now, and will give us her perspectives. Next to her is Sergio Sen. He's from the NIH in the United States, so one of the largest funding body of federal funding body. He's most closely related to Galaxy through the Anvil effort on the outreach side of things. So here's his perspectives. We have Brad Langhorst from the New England Labs, so non-academic, not funders perspective a little bit. I've seen Brad for at least 10 years, probably longer, coming to these GCCs, and have this image of him sitting around with students and just about every GCC, helping them, giving a lending hand. I've always heard phenomenal comments about him and reactions, so looking forward to hearing the reactions from him. Then we have Tim Griffin. He's one of the Galaxy PIs, so probably the first branch of Galaxy that wasn't Galaxy for Genomics in the main Galaxy. Hosted GCC2024 at the University of Minnesota. And so a perspective there. And then we have Jeremy Gex from the Moffitt Cancer Center. As we just saw a few minutes ago, he's been with Galaxy for 15 years since his postdoc days, and has made strides in promoting Galaxy and using Galaxy in a variety of spaces, currently mostly focusing on Galaxy on machine learning and cancer. So with that, I'm going to start off on a number of questions. And like I said, this is Jeremy's 15-year anniversary, so getting a piece of cake at one of the breaks. So we have 3 high-level topics that the kind of discussions are grouped around. And the first one is about empowering users, right? I mean, Galaxy is about helping users. It's about enabling them to do more than they were able to do before. And so we have a few questions, I guess, about where Galaxy is now, where it can go. And as you'll see, most of these questions are sort of applicable, right? They are things that we can hopefully act on in the foreseeable future, not 5-10 years, but in the next 5-10 months, hopefully, right? So the plot we see on the left is from a doc store. It is the number of weekly downloads of the IWC workflows. As you probably, hopefully, are all aware, Marius gave a beautiful talk on Monday about IWC. It's growing every year. For the past couple of years, we've had 20-odd workflows added. We're approaching 100 workflows. Well, by the end of the year, there should be 100 workflows in IWC. And these are now the sort of the numbers, right? So we're seeing about 400 downloads per week. We have this slope that's going in the right direction in terms of the adoption. And that's just one example of how Galaxy has attempted to make high quality or best practice analyses more accessible to the users. And so I guess my question to the panel, and you can take this as you wish, no prescribed order or anything. How do we go from this sort of initial slope that has the correct trend into the hockey stick curve? If you have some ideas, and again, whether this is the IWC workflows or whether this is other ideas that you may have, we're all ears. And to seed some of the discussion with the people's reactions in the room, we have this interactive component at menti.com. So you can scan that QR code. Sorry for it being at the very bottom left. I didn't think about the placement necessarily, but there's some other slides. You go back for a sec so we get the code. So if you just go to menti.com and you can put in the code or scan the QR code, and you can answer the question on the form, and we'll display it in a minute. But anyway, in the meantime, if any of you visionaries has a comment, it's your turn.
Ines, is the question, the way I viewed Galaxy, the hockey stick curve already happened for this community in the past, and we are in that sharply growing phase. So is the question forward looking? Yes. For workflows just coming out, how to have that hockey stick happen again and again and again as new things keep happening on Galaxy?
So, I mean, that, yes, but let's say hopefully somewhat focused on helping scientists do good quality analysis. So something that is impactful, that has a quality associated with it. And so again, we saw talk about the high quality standards of the GTN, and that's contributing to this space of ensuring that people do good work, that they're not just doing random things, but that we encourage them to do the right thing, I guess.
And I guess the question I have in response to the question is, so I work for the Human Genome Research Institute at NIH, and in a bigger sense, we try to bring new people into the genomics workforce. That starts with two existing states doing a little bit of genomics and could use some help. And then there's may not have heard of genomics at all, because they're in institutions where genomics is not just something that could be taught small place, very little funding. So there's the one kind of user that we literally try to attract into the genomics audience. Then there's the other kind, which is doing a little bit of genomics, could use more help to be able to do what they already know they want to do. So for Galaxy, I used to use it a lot when I was a real scientist. In the last 5 years as a science administrator, I've lost touch with the hands-on use of it. But is the future Galaxy user base people that have already touched Galaxy and you want to help them get better at it? Or are you also looking at bringing people into Galaxy if they have not done any informatics at all?
Both, but it's a conversation. There's
Yeah,
no right or
yeah,
wrong
yeah,
answer.
yeah.
So I don't know the answer.
Because the way to get that hockey stick happening is slightly different for those two groups. The people that have used Galaxy a little is probably connecting them to the training network, connecting them to existing resources. The people that have not used Galaxy at all, more what I would call a communications exercise. Here's something we have that could be of use to you if you want to be a bot.
So I think what I want to say here is that there's an opportunity for many of us who started in computer science and are closer to the technology to partner with our biological collaborators and reduce that gap. At least in the field of cancer that I've been mostly involved in over the last 10 or 15 years, the truly great science that comes out is a collaboration oftentimes between the computational researchers and the biological researchers. And I encourage all of you that are perhaps more technically minded here to think about the opportunities to work more closely with your colleagues on the biological side, and do not be intimidated by the knowledge, not so much the knowledge, but the nomenclature that's used, the terminology, to ask basic questions. So as Ennis was quick to point out, I've now had 15 years in Galaxy, and I spent maybe the first 3 or 4 years really doing software development in Galaxy. And then the last 10 years, I've spent growing what I would like to say is my biological knowledge. So I can work at the interface between the two now. And the people that can work at the interface, and I'm biased here, but the people that can work and talk to the biologists and understand how the biologists think about the world and connect that back to the technology needs that they have are really very valuable. And so the ability to talk in both domains and put a foot in both domains is something that I think we can do as a group to encourage Galaxy usage going forward, because you can understand what the needs are and then design for those needs and go back to your colleagues, because you have those collaborations and connections, and say to them, look, we have this awesome new thing in Galaxy, take a look at it. And that's how you're going to get that uptake in Galaxy. That's how you're going to get those individuals excited about Galaxy, by saying, I know you have this problem because we've talked about it in the past, and now I have a solution to share with you.
Maybe I'll just add a little to this. So the reason I like Galaxy is that it lets us blur those boundaries, as Jeremy is kind of talking about. And I think it's probably more effective right now at helping people who don't have a bunch of computational skill be able to do high quality analysis. That was the original goal, I think, for Galaxy, is to make computation more accessible. I think this takes it to the next level. And if we really want to maximize the impact of the effort that's been put into doing all the training, creating these workflows, curating this stuff, making sure the test data is available, I think we've got to be talking about this just with colleagues like you're suggesting, but also at meetings that aren't computational type meetings, not biological data science and genome informatics, but I don't know, whatever it is, the Gordon conference on dinoflagellate, whatever it is that maybe somebody would like to apply RNA-seq for their work, and they don't really know how to approach that because the data analysis is intimidating. I think we've got, as people who care about maximizing science and having more data-centric science happen in the world, I think, maybe let's try to go to some of those meetings and share the excitement about the possibilities that are available with all the training resources and these workflows that kind of connect together to make them really usable by people who maybe don't find that genomics super accessible due to computing.
Yeah, I could add a couple of things, kind of segues off of both those points. I mean, I think first off, keeping the Galaxy training network resource as strong as possible and supporting that is where all this starts. But, there's some responsibility, like for our work, for example, we're in a pretty domain specific area of sort of biological mass spectrometry. I think one way to grow these things is, we're out at more applied meetings, people using the technology and generating the data, and we're trying to push, hey, you should look at Galaxy because it can solve a lot of your problems. But it's hard to crack into that sometimes because people have their way of doing it, and there's commercial software that competes. So, there's bar to get over to start to actually look at it and actually use it for real. But I think what I've been thinking about is what we could do some more of, and maybe there's others in domains like this, is push the training network, these workflows as a training tool to say, hey, if you have new students, all the way up postdocs, whatever, coming to your lab and you're a mass spectrometry lab, you want them to learn how do you analyze data and what is this all about? Take a look at some of these workflows, because even, hopefully they end up using Galaxy, but even if not, it is a super, amazing resource to walk you through the steps of, here's your raw data, how do you process it, what comes out of it. So one way that I'm kind of made some notes during this conference is to, kind of promote this through various places like the Human Proteome Organization. The American Society for Mass Spectrometry is a gigantic, international mass spec consortium of people that belong to that. So as these workflows mature and obviously they work, and so that we're sure they're not going to hit a dead end, I think we can just do more to promote, through various channels, hey, there's a training going on, the smorgasbord or whatever, and get more people's eyes on this. And I think it'll pull some people in.
I'd like to jump a bit on the cross-disciplinary communication side of it as well, because I thought that was a really great point. And I think we really underestimate how intimidating it is for people to speak across disciplines. I think we really underestimate how hard it is for people to ask questions about someone else's field. In science, we're taught that we're valued for our brains and we're valued for our intellectual merit. And then we have to ask stupid, basic questions of people who, for them, it's completely normal and completely absurd you'd even ask that question. So it's very nature of how science becomes these critical thinkers and values us for our brains actually prevents this cross-disciplinary communication. And I think one of the best things we can do, particularly the higher up we are in a field, is to ask those basic questions to put people a bit at ease. So, and I really liked what you said as well about these two different populations, the people that know they want to do a bit of omics analysis and the population that don't even know how to get involved. And I think that's a critical untapped population that is often only, they're not going to be the people who ask a question in a group, in a large group or in a large conference. They're going to be afraid to go up to that poster. And the success that I've had with working with those individuals has come from meeting them where they are, from person-to-person conversations that puts them at ease and will actually get them to admit what they don't know or be okay with what they don't know. And then when that is received in a very positive way, and I can help make those connections between, oh, this is what you need, this might help you, this will be great. That's the value in those conversations. And how we do that at scale, I think, is really tricky. How we can put people at ease in a targeted user-based conference to get them to interact with us, I think it's its own art form and something to definitely practice.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, meeting people where they are. And I think that might also physically mean meeting them where the communities are. So the conference is awesome because it's very cross-disciplinary, but if you go to your disciplines for those doing analysis and you're at the specialist conference, I think, it would be awesome if you also kind of, I'm wondering, like, what's the way to make, the existence of these, analysis, Galaxy in general, training, workflows, make that known, make it, more comfortable for people of a particular discipline. So I'm thinking, small workshops at conferences. What do you think about the role those can play? Maybe we can increase our efforts to represent at like meetings that are within our expertise, and to maybe, show some people the power that you can get.
Great question. And I feel like you've teed me up for one of my big vents. So I think it's a really good point. And I think fundamentally how we present what we do is different across fields. So if you're a bench biologist, you present from, we want to know this, this is our question. How does a stem cell differentiate into whatever cell it has to be? We start with the question. When you're in when we're looking at it from an infrastructure point of view, we often start with big numbers and big graphs and here's this cool stuff I made. You don't often start with the question. And this is exactly how I pitch people and how I get people to try to do bioinformatics for the first time, as I start them at the question and the big overview. This is the question you want. This is the biological insight you want. And then I slowly then feed in, and here's how you get there. And here's this user story. And we talked about impact metrics sometimes this week, or user stories or case studies. So rarely when we make these big, beautiful, fantastic analyses or infrastructures or whatever it happens to be, do we close that loop and say, here's the question that this person has asked. And this was the analysis that was needed in order to answer that question. And then we made that analysis into a Galaxy tool. And then they used the Galaxy tool. And from that, they were able to publish this paper. If you stick on the top of your poster, these 3 users got these 3 papers from answering this question, and you have the question in big and bold, that is going to get people to come to you because they're going to say, oh, sweet, I want to use that analysis and get my papers, please. And then they'll come to your workshop. So I think the way we pitch to our bench biologists needs to change and talk to them the way that they would pitch or the way that they would present. I think that's one of the biggest ways we can close that gap.
Yeah, I'll add the work I do, unfortunately, makes me think of things through a money perspective more often these days. So I think the Galaxy Training Network, one idea would be to spin that off as a grant of its own. Make sure there's enough money built into the application so that Galaxy people can travel to a wider range of fields, proteomics, microbiomes, a little bit of astrology I saw somewhere. So I think by making sure that Galaxy has financial support to go out and start spreading the word in these communities is a great way to have more people aware of what's happening here. And then they would come and say, oh, I've been doing this on my university computer, but I just heard about Galaxy. It just starts with having people able to travel across the world in some cases and go do a Galaxy pitch, which of course has been done many times before, but just this time in many more other fields beyond genomics. I guess the other thing is in terms of mapping the user base with NIH, they make us do somewhat structured ways of saying how many of your users were from Asia, how many were from Europe, how many were from Africa. So I don't know whether one other way for Galaxy to look at the future community would be to say, where are we missing people? You know, in the last 10 GCCs, did we have countries that did not send a single attendee, or a continent that was clearly less than the others? And then say, okay, next year we have to do at least a few local events over there, because for whatever mix of reasons, we are missing out on that part of the potential user base.
Pick up on the funding aspect, trying to think about how do people discover, people generally propose the work they want to do to a funding agency. I don't know if the level, I mean, one of the luxuries of working in not in an academic environment is that I don't have to write grants. I have other requirements, but it's, I don't know much about how that all works, but it does seem like people would have to somehow specify how they're going to analyze their data. I wonder if in the study sections or as people are getting feedback, if there's an opportunity for us to somehow share that these workflows are available to people and that they won't have to allocate a large amount of funding to be able to put these into practice. They could leverage that, and if somehow the funders can say, oh, this is a synergy. You don't have to reinvent the wheel to do all the RNA-seq work. You can use the existing, vetted tools and some expertise and training resources and all that kind of stuff. Is there? I wonder if there's maybe you've got some thoughts on that, or maybe others have.
I mean, literally, the NIH program officer is sort of like the pro bono lawyer for the applicant. Let's say someone on the Galaxy side says, okay, this sounds good. I'm going to try writing up Galaxy Training Network as a U24 award for $1 million a year for the next 5 years. So then someone like me, and in this case, I would literally grab it and make it my award, my application. But then I work with the applicant saying, look, there's already pieces of this covered in the parent Galaxy award. So let's make sure we are not applying for the same thing 2 times. The reviewer will catch on to that. On the other hand, I don't see Galaxy proteomics in the parent award. So you could definitely have something new in this one that says Galaxy needs to do more outreach in proteomics. So NIH program officers who love a particular piece of science. And as a Galaxy user, of course, I'm a fan myself. I would be the person trying to make sure that what's getting applied for fits into gaps in the existing funding. And then if the review score turns out nice, I would go back and tell my leadership, how can we not fund them? Like, look what the reviewer said. And look, Congress gave us a 2% increase this year. So it really resembles the legal system in terms of having someone that will advocate for you, both on the reviewer side and as well as the program officers.
All right. Right. Maybe one more thing on the hockey stick. It seems like we're investing in young people and students as part of our training. It seems like a lot of the people who participate in the smorgasbords in the past and other Galaxy training events are students. So I think it's kind of natural that their use and impact, if they're successful with Galaxy, is going to take some time before it does the sort of this hockey stick growth. So maybe we've already done all the right things. I don't know, but it doesn't mean stop trying. But I think these seeds may take some time to bloom.
Absolutely. It's just we have some good ideas. I think that in an elaborate way, I guess I'll do the opposite. I'll sum them up, and I'll say accessible training, I think, is what I took away from the comments that that you guys provided. So and again, this is being recorded, so we can delve into the details of the conversation as time goes on. But how do you know you got 5 PhDs on stage? 20 minutes for one answer. Right, can we go to the slides again? All right, so we're going to move on to the next question, somewhat related. But again, Galaxy is about reproducibility, and it's about collaboration. It's about sharing what you've done with others. It's about not redoing what others have done, right? Wendy has spoken about this on many occasions in the past. And if we look at the, just one data point from usegalaxy.org, there are over 500,000 workflows that people have created on usegalaxy.org. And if we look at how many times workflows have been invoked or run, it's 750,000 times.
It's very recent that you can run a public workflow without importing it first. So once you import it, it becomes a new workflow. So, I mean, the ratio might be a little better.
Okay. All right. So if we multiply it by 2, right, we're 1.14, right? If it's twice, if it's 5 times as much, right, that means you create a workflow, it's been run 5 times. Right? And it seems like there's an opportunity to do something different, right? Where we don't want to end up is for any of you that might have gone to the site like Retail Me Not, and you try to find one of those coupons and it says 20 people tried today, you try, does not work. You try again, all you do is keep getting the ads opened up, right? So want to avoid the sort of the risk of a lot of these workflows being published, being released out into the wild, and then not working. And so that, like I said, it somewhat ties into the previous question of how do we ensure that high quality work comes out of Galaxy. But are any ideas, any thoughts on how we can promote reuse of work that people have invested in Galaxy that certainly hasn't been discussed thus far? Mm-hmm.
I have 2 thoughts, and let me say up front here, I'm deliberately trying to be somewhat provocative here because this is what the panel is for. I think at least this is what I was told the panel is for, right, Anis? So provocative thought number 1 is to simplify things dramatically. Galaxy does tremendous amounts of stuff. It can do tremendous amounts of stuff, but you've got to learn a lot about the system to make that possible. I would like to see a simpler approach sometimes where someone can say, here are one of 10 common analyses that you want to run. Here's a workflow for your analysis, and let's go from there. I understand it's not that easy, but that basic concept of going through a couple clicks, I think would be really valuable. And I had 2 thoughts. I forgot the second one. So I'm just going to stick with simplicity for now as my answer to this particular challenge is we need to make it much, much simpler for people to figure out what they're doing. Oh, my second thought, somewhat provocative. We should start using the approaches in large language models. So this AI approach where you can chat with your data and take advantage of that in the context of the Galaxy framework as well and say, let's try to meet people and say, if you type in RNA-seq, it's not always going to give you the correct answer, but maybe it can get you close to what you want. It can get you to that training resource or that set of training resources that you want. So taking advantage of these AI agents, I think could be really beneficial here as well to help surface the resources that we have in an easier way.
So riff off of your simplicity plan. I've been talking about this and trying to sell it to people for a couple of GCC and CoFests, but workflow-centric Galaxy that looks like a web form. It doesn't look like Galaxy at all. It just like has the absolute minimum stuff you need to do to start this workflow for this very specific application. I think that then people can get the Galaxy stuff after they've seen some data, seen some results. Something is moving. They don't have to commit to learning what Galaxy is, which is kind of obvious for people in this room, but it's not obvious for everybody, I don't think. So I'd love to see that level of simplicity.
Yeah, I had the thought as well of sort of like a scientific market survey within the different fields that use Galaxy. I'm trying to crystallize in my mind the idea of saturation of users doing a particular kind of science. For people assembling vertebrate genomes, my hunch is that a much greater percentage of people who work in vertebrate genome assembly have heard of or used Galaxy to some extent. And now switching fields completely, microbiome science, where I spent a few years. I have a hunch that there is a much, much larger percentage of microbiome scientists who don't even know that Galaxy has a lot to offer them. So going field by field and seeing where are we hitting some reasonable percentage of the people that could use Galaxy, and in what other parts of the spectrum does Galaxy have things to offer, but we know that most people are still running to their local bioinformatics core or buying something from a company. So there has to be parts of the spectrum that are still relatively sparse in terms of Galaxy users who could get something out of Galaxy, and identifying those and doing more outreach with those groups. I keep coming back to microbiome because I can almost vouch for the fact that there are possibly many, many more microbiome Galaxy users than currently exist. But yeah, that's another way to get workflow usage numbers up, would be my guess.
Any comments or questions on the topic from the audience? Any users with experience that would want to add to it?
Perhaps provocative in the other way. I work in a field in genome assembly annotation where the new software is produced almost every 5 minutes, and then your workflow from last month is already out of date. And I wonder if there's a way to be more flexible, because a lot of these workflows, the topology is the same, but the software's changed, the versions change, and mostly the outputs are the same. And I don't know if it's possible to think about a workflow as a more loose kind of concept. It's not very fair, but I wonder if there's a way of linking this in.
Yes, yes, yes. So that's actually a pretty good point. And also, I want to give the IWC perspective on this and also say something about Galaxy tools. So Galaxy tools wrap an underlying command line tool. And that's a nice thing in the sense that the parameters stay constant for the most part. And that makes it very easy to update. And so I think in the IWC, we have about 70 workflows, but we have over 1,000 versions. And that's possible because as new tools are published, we automatically update them. And we version them. So, if you didn't want the update, you don't have to use it, but it is there and it is always up to date. Of course, if the tool changes, you got to change the workflow, but there's no way around that, I think.
If no one else wants to say something on this, I would like to say something. I think it's just about also thinking about workflows. I mean, this also applies to trainings on like just different levels of detail, right? It's also what Marius just said. We have like the workflows and then we have multiple different versions of it. But if we go to the layer of ontology, we can actually build workflows at a higher layer of abstraction. And maybe this is something that we should consider maybe supporting better in Galaxy, that we say, hey, I want to have a workflow that supports these operations and brings me from this data to this data. And then I see all the workflows that can actually do that. So to just take up the whole workflow debate like one layer.
That resonates with me. Definitely the idea that workflows are concept workflows. So like it's an adapter trimmer and an aligner, not FastP and BWMM. That would be cool. And I think we already kind of have almost everything we need to do that. Maybe it's maybe there's a workflow clustering that could be applied, machine learning style, with using our tool identities and these sort of EDM IDs on these tools, what their purpose is, how they work, or even if we don't have that, just based on input and output types, I suspect that we could get pretty good groupings of these are really similar workflows that might be able to answer your question. How do we decide which one is the most appropriate? That may be a little more challenging, but I guess there's still room for bioinformatics and expertise down the road too.
Can I jump in on that actually? Because this is something I've been pondering quite a bit. So in the single cell community, for example, we have users who want to use the data and want to use the analysis. We have some fantastic tool wrappers who know a bit of single cell and know a bit of a number of fields. And I think the bigger Galaxy grows, the more those specialisms continue, right? You'll have people who are fantastic tool wrappers who will know nothing about the actual domain that they're wrapping for, right? And then you'll have the users who also don't know the best practices in that particular domain. So we kind of throw around best practices in a few different ways, as in like good, fair practices, but there's also where is the field? What is the cutting edge bit of the field? And the very people who will probably know that the best are often the people who are a bit reticent of even using Galaxy, because this is your bioinformatics expertise. These are your domain users who don't need a button-based environment in order to do their analysis. And I think I find that, if we're being controversial, I find that there's a bit of friction there and like trying to get them to use our Galaxy. When I wonder if there might be more something like an oversight or an editorial board or some way that we can include this community, not because we want them to change how they're doing their analysis, but because we want their cutting edge insights on where the best type of analysis is in that field. So single cell is moving constantly. There's a new algorithm every 5 seconds, it feels like. The best analysis is constantly on the run. So how we can incorporate that as like a whole other community, and then determining what is the best workflow to use, and then how can we visualize that to a user. Like last year I was thinking, and it got smashed down, so I'm not saying that we do this, but I was like, the number of successful runs versus the number of failed runs, if that appeared next to the workflow, it'd be easier for a user to figure out, yes, I want to use that, no, I don't want to use that. We don't have to talk about that right now, but like some sort of indication to say, this was checked by a bioinformatics expert group 2 months ago, and they said that this is the best workflow. Like some way of indicating, both using that group and then also indicating that on the workflow, I think would be the ideal dream.
I would agree with that a lot. I've long thought of Galaxy as having an opportunity to take the bioinformatics expertise that's been developed in the rest of the world and then being able to share it out with everybody else. And so I think about Galaxy as aligning the incentives of many different communities, ideally. And here we're talking about aligning the incentives of the bioinformatics experts, who are not going to be the core Galaxy users, but do want to see their methods used widely. So you're meeting their incentives there. And then obviously the users that want to pick up those best practices using Galaxy as a result of that. So Galaxy can nicely sit in the middle. Again, I think all of us need to do the work to talk to those different communities, articulate how it can help them, and then bring them together ultimately.
Maybe there's some success stories that we need to celebrate more and help bioinformatics people kind of understand. Like everybody wants their tool. You build a tool because you want people to use it. You want to have impact. You want to have funders understand that this is an important tool. Citations, I think people use that a lot, but maybe there's like, I think some of the tools like deep tools that are accessible via Galaxy and by many other routes as well, probably have the impact that they have in part because of that accessibility. And if we can help kind of on-ramp those people and increase their impact, both sharing their expertise, but also just in their own self-interest of getting their tools more use. Maybe we should go to the biological data science and bring those people in too.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm not from the bio community, so my perspective is probably kind of warped and not representative of most of the room. But from the kind of material science, the community was trying to go there. When we've kind of tried to, I guess, create a sort of standard or kind of canonical workflow for a piece of analysis, from the perspective of, oh, I'm going from my raw data to the final graphs that I want to put in my paper and publish. And then looking at kind of different papers in the same field, it's really hard to have a workflow that works for everyone, for every, and perhaps that's just the way that we've written our tools or the way we've written our workflows. And it almost comes back to this idea of kind of, oh, well, you kind of have to import a public workflow before you can use it. In a lot of my experience trying to kind of do this, how would this work for this paper or kind of for this use case? You might start from a kind of canonical example, but then, for me, for my data, I need to kind of add in a second sort of, I need to do this first section twice because I've got, more samples to compare, and then I don't want that graph at the end. And I guess that would also kind of show up as I might have imported this public workflow that's the kind of standard, but then I've modified it for my specific use case, and that would then show up as one of those sort of 500,000 duplicate workflows. But in that sense, it is kind of still, I guess, representative of that kind of original canonical workflow, but I don't, as far as I'm aware, there's not a way to kind of represent that or kind of say that this workflow is almost a child of this kind of original parent. And so kind of, yeah, maybe it comes into the ideas of sort of classifying things and saying these are all from this kind of family of analysis. But yeah, and that's mainly just my perspective. I'm not even sure it's a question, but if there is a way of kind of representing that and kind of making it easier to say, oh, I'm a scientist, I want to do this kind of analysis, but modify it for my particular use case without just starting from scratch and it appearing as another one of the 500,000. Yeah.
I know that Carol's starting this with Workflow Hub, but I know that people we get to upload their workflows really like that they can put their workflow there and there's a citation. And I know she's lobbying journals to have this included in part of their checklist. And I think this is a good example of where someone could say, I used this workflow, Smith et al. And Adoy, and I modified step 3. And then for them also, they don't have to write a method section, which is another advantage. But I think this also incentivizes people to upload their workflows because then they get citations. Because that's how scientists work, I guess. But I think it's going the right way, but maybe Galaxy can also help lobby this more.
I just kind of, from the last point, I mean, we run into that a lot with ours as well, where we have like a core base workflow, but then and we always say, well, a great part of Galaxy is it's customizable. So like, for example, in like proteomics and mass spec, somebody might do a quantitative proteomics, which kind of uses this base workflow, but there's some people do like a labeling experiment with stable isotopes, and then they need a certain different parameter. Some people do non-labeled. So you write a workflow that does one of those, and you tell them it could do other things, but it's hard then that, immediately they have to know something, and how do I change these parameters? So maybe it goes back to this, like, I don't know, AI intelligence, where they could almost speak into it and say, I want to do this analysis with this type of quantitative, and it would lead them at least into what they would have to do to change it. But, so make it more intelligent and simple and sort of user friendly, instead of, well, go learn some more things and then you can change all your parameters and make this work for yourself. So
while we're doing pie in the sky and machine learning, I think it'd be kind of cool to just upload your data and say, hey, Galaxy, which analysis should I apply to this? Like, just here's a FASTQ file. Like, I know the genomic space, but I imagine that's true. Sounds like for proteomics as well. Maybe there's features in there that say, hey, oh, that's an RNA-seq and it's directional. And we understand that it's like poly A depleted because like this, we've trained it with all these different kinds of libraries that we understand. And therefore, here's the set of workflows that are appropriate. I don't know, I think that'd be kind of fun. Terrible idea? I don't know. What do you guys think?
So there is some work, I guess. You can come to the BOF tomorrow, Dan and Ahmed Tyler on Chat GXY. Not exactly all that. There's some, there was some discussion, why not that, but it's a step in that direction. I guess we'll move on, but there's some questions on Menti as well, and I'll feed these in, I guess, as the discussion continues. I guess one, it's phrased as a question, but maybe it's more of a comment because it seems like a technical thing, is, and it ties up into this AI/ML work, is, can we do a similar thing to suggesting the next tool to suggest a workflow a person can use? And so based on the discussion thus far, I'd say the answer is yes. It's how maybe is a bigger question, I guess, and that's a longer discussion. So unless somebody has a comment they want to express.
So the language to train an AI tool to suggest workflows would have to come from as much of the biologists talking into the training data set as much as from the computational side of the data set. So my concern would be right now that the suggestions that AI would pull out of Galaxy and give back to someone that is a pure biologist, for lack of a better word, would be heavily biased by text or language that was from computationally trained people. To have this AI really do its job well, you would need to talk a lot to people that grow cell cultures and have never seen a FASTQ file. People that do proteomics but are not going to be crunching the data. So until the AI has heard both sides of the divide, I have a hunch that the tool selection will continue to be suboptimal to some extent.
Good point.
Yeah, I guess it would have to be a bit guided at this point, at least maybe give them a menu if they even know enough to know what to select. So at least it pushes them in the right direction versus a free for all of trying to explain what they want to do. So.
Right. I'll move us to the next question, which is maybe related a bit, but this conference is really about people working on the technical terms and technical parts of Galaxy and users using it, coming together, talking. But community is growing, world's a big place, and there's new domains coming in, and so we already have computer scientists that are trying to do genomics now. They're trying to do material science and astronomy and all, and it's getting thin. The connections are getting thin, I guess. And so this is a request for commentary about how we can improve connections between users and developers without going through the 1-800 Galaxy and definitely avoiding the default answers that people may get.
I'd like to give two very good, in my opinion, tips on this, which is I think across the board in academia or really any scientific field, we need to remove the word just from our vocabulary. Oh, you just do this, or you just spin that up. You will immediately ostracize half of the room whenever you say that. So I think we need to remove the word just from our vocabulary. And two, it is fascinating how much we assume knowledge in others. So it's like, even if all you do is start recognizing that, how much you're assuming that person can do or can know, like not all bioinformaticians use GitHub. And that was something I just assumed from all of my experiences. And then I met a whole bunch who didn't. And it was like, it's very interesting when you start to reflect on this, how much you are assuming the other person knows, and therefore how little you can get done with that communication. So I think that's sort of phase one, like just how we talk to people, get better at that, and then go talk to people.
One of the things we do at New England Biolabs, at least in my team, is I lead a computational team, and that group doesn't sit together. So they sit at the benches. So they don't like it. They can't drink the coffee. It's not. There's a little pushback on sitting next to noisy instrumentation, but with their bench colleagues. I force them to sort of distribute this way because those opportunities for connection are important. So how do we do that when it's not, hey, this is shared space, or a lot of people are working remotely. I've chatted with a number of people here who are working somewhere else. I think that works for some period of time, but like renewing the connections, obviously conferences are helpful there, but not if it's all the same category of people. So I guess maybe another plug for going to the conference of the thing you're interested in with just a little bit of knowledge and kind of share what you know and find a new interstitial space to work on. But I don't have any great ideas about how to do this large scale. It's pretty challenging, I think.
I feel like I'm going to be repetitive here, but I'm really going to try hard not to be. As individuals in this very connected world, and as scientists and developers and whatnot, the idea of how you communicate with people that don't have the same knowledge as you is super important. And it's something that I would encourage everyone to think about really carefully. Just only, those types of words are really challenging. I run a computational research lab when I'm not leading research informatics at Moffitt, and my computational lab has everyone from software engineers to data scientists and to cancer biologists. And we regularly have meetings where we talk about really basic concepts. And they're basic to some people, but they're not at all basic to others. And trying to bridge those gaps is something that we come around to again and again and again. And Wendy's point earlier about being able to ask basic questions is a really important one. I feel like that's one of the best indicators that you are in a space where you are comfortable with your colleagues and that you can ideally model that type of behavior to others is really important. When you have those basic questions, you've given people the freedom to ask and to really get to the heart of what needs to be understood before you can get further. So one way to think about this is I continue to take steps back until I can find common ground with a colleague. So, if we disagree about an analysis, maybe we talk about what the goals of the analysis are. And if we don't have the goals of the analysis, we talk about the goals of the overall project. And if we don't have the goals of the overall project, maybe we talk about the context of why we're asking these types of questions. So step back, step back, step back until you can build that common ground and then dig back in. So I really think communication is at the heart of this because users and developers come at this from different perspectives, but the opportunities when you get there and you have that shared understanding and take advantage of what each person has to offer are really tremendous.
I want to add a quantification aspect to this. So I can speak from the Anvil perspective. Jeremy and Mike and others, feel free to chime in. So we have a few hundred-ish Anvil users. We have one Anvil outreach team, which is 6, 8, maybe stretching it 10 people. And already on some months, it gets to the point where with just a few hundred users, the level of support being requested from the outreach team is pretty much at the max of what I feel they were fairly funded to do. So for Galaxy, I'm curious if there is a sense of quantification of, for a particular workflow or a particular piece of Galaxy, what is the ratio of users and developers? And are there workflows that there are 100 times more users than developers and 100 times more requests for help? And would it be something where the developers there could do a little more to get more people looped in on their side so there's someone able to connect to a user a little more often? So with Anvil, the solution is probably going to be to try finding more money for increasing the size of the Anvil outreach team, because I don't really see a way to grow a community, not grow the number of people that will help users of the.
Sorry, you have been talking about numbers, and if I may have a rather profane question about the goals of the outreach, just for my curiosity, are there any deadlines or user numbers or any key indicators set that you would be considering ideal? For example, like in the second quarter of 2025 or so. Are there anything you can give us which is public?
Do you mean for Anvil?
Or Galaxy as a whole? Any workflow, any user numbers? Sorry, I said it would be rather profane.
The Galaxy part I'm going to punt to him.
Yeah.
Anvil, I could comment.
Yeah. I mean, well, I guess to be generic, I guess transparency is part of the project. So the numbers we have, we're happy to share, and we try to do so. I don't know if you saw my presentation from a couple of days ago. There's some numbers on that dashboard, and a lot of more technical, I guess, bits. When it comes to outreach specifically, I think I see Jen there hiding away, but she handles what I would think is vast majority of our outreach, and then it's the rest of the community that chimes in. So the Galaxy Help Board that exists as a community board sees some participation from the broad community, but again, vast majority is answered by Jen, and then the people she tends to reach out to are people that tend to pitch in on their own, but.
Question I have that touches on some earlier points that Wendy made, and also about this improving connections. So developers, when they make tools, they want their tools to be used. And I think that developers, one thing that they probably hate the most is like trying to diagnose some users like dependency hell of trying to get the tool installed. I'm wondering if we might, for Galaxy, if we can essentially reach out to like tool developers and like essentially put like PRs on their tools on GitHub and say like, I want to like edit your README, for example, and add like, here's the install instructions, and also say this tool is already implemented on Galaxy. Because I'm sure there's like a certain subset of users that are going to, I need to use tool X because I'm in single cell and I need to use this tool. And if all they see are instructions of like, you need to install these 15 packages and all this kind of stuff, but then they also see, also found on Galaxy, then there's going to be a certain subset of users that are going to be like, oh, I don't care about Galaxy, I'm going to run on my own. But there's going to be another, I'm going to argue, a larger class of users that are going to see that and say, I'm going to use it on Galaxy because then I don't have to install these 15 packages. And so there might be a way to essentially, from the developer side, they no longer have to like manage the dependencies of everybody because they have it's available on Galaxy. But I don't know if something like this is already existing, but I think a widespread adoption might be really nice.
Maybe I think you wanted to give something directly to that question.
We have, or at least we are working on this with Bioconductor.
Love this idea. I think it's seems like an awesome sort of CoFest idea, either to do it manually or to write some software that detects the linkage between Galaxy tools and the installation. I think we already have some URL kind of decorations in some tools, but probably not a lot of them. I bet that seems like a great impact for like back a ways of getting more impact either on workflows. That might be a little tricky, as people might not be looking for workflows, but I think on the tool level that seems really good. And maybe tool to workflow would be cool too. So like, hey, this tool is used in this Galaxy workflow and the raw tool as well. Thanks.
Ennis, do you think we could get a badge on GitHub? You know, put like a Galaxy badge to have on. Yeah, like we could start branding a little bit, right? If something is over in Galaxy, you can have a little, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right? That sounds like a good goal.
I don't think I'm the gatekeeper, but yeah, no, I mean, practical ideas, right?
Don't put it in the README. Like, let's have a little picture and then, that links someplace like us.
Yeah, things like that, exactly. And the Wendy's first comment about avoiding the word just when communicating about a new topic, especially or with a new person. Things like that are, to me at least, super valuable because they're tiny little adjustments that don't cost us anything and help tremendously. So some things are certainly a lot more complicated. So the more little things we can do, we used to call them paper cuts in Galaxy when we had those things, and it helped tremendously to, build the software up, make it more usable. So this is, at a next level or different level, but. Gareth.
Thanks, Ennis. I just want to go back, I think 3 questions now to the statement here. Paraphrased, or what I heard in that, is what is Galaxy doing in Q2 in 2025? The answer is Galaxy has a roadmap. Galaxy is working very hard to make that roadmap more publicly findable and digestible. And I think that is a fantastic question, because if we can show to you where we intend to take the project over the next few years, hopefully that will attract you and your colleagues to come and use us more.
Thanks, Gareth.
I wanted to return to that question as well and say that from my perspective, there are 2 things that we want to do concretely if we're going to be successful in the next year. Number 1 is a focus on scientific success stories. So what science was enabled by Galaxy? Number 2, and this one I realize is potentially a step besides, or a step outside of what many of us normally do. But number 2 is definitely in the wheelhouse of what we all do in this room as developers, which is, can we demonstrate numbers that can support that success? They're not, it's ideal if we can tie the success stories to those numbers, but even if we show we're running large numbers of jobs, we can run analyses faster than before, and we can accomplish things that have not been possible in the past technically. Those are success stories as well. So I would say between those 2 sets of metrics or those 2 styles of impact, you would cover nicely what we want to accomplish in the next year. The roadmap is a great example of, maybe trying to put those 2 things together technically, so to speak, or conceptually put them together.
So I have maybe more comment, it might turn into a question, but my interaction. So I work on Galaxy. I'm also funded to work on Anvil with Outreach, and have been privileged to lead a couple of trainings. And I think that I really love the points that Wendy and Jeremy have made about helping to get onto a common ground with users, because even when I'm giving trainings, I can observe the way that people are interacting with the platforms, and I can learn more about different ways that people interact with that. So being open to understanding people's experience. It's more about them receiving the help that they need than me being able to answer their question and move on. I think that's been tremendously helpful for me. And I think kind of the whole point of the conference here too has been to learn what's new. So on that user end, and then I think from the developer side too, it's really helpful, as Wendy was also commenting, to focus on what are the questions that users are trying to answer. So as tools are being developed, as features are being developed, to really frame the communication about those new tools or those new features so that users can understand how it's going to help them solve the problems that they have or improve their experience doing analyses. So I think coming at it from both of those perspectives and then hopefully tying that into the roadmap where a really strong piece of that is the communication about what we're doing so that it's able to reach users, I think is an important piece. And I think then the third point that I want to make is that one thing that I think is a testament to this community is the way that our users have become major contributors and really drive the project. And so being able to take that time for someone to fully understand the platform in a way that when they're communicating with other users or communicating with other bioinformaticians in their labs, they can convert more users as well, who then will grow the community and be able to lead more trainings and expand as well. So I think growing those champions is really an important part of the work of helping people. You might just be helping someone with their analysis today, but you might be converting someone into someone who's a lifelong Galaxy user and is going to be able to expand Galaxy into their space. So yeah, just some comments.
I'm going to move us on to the next topic. Thank you all for engagement and commentary. So, yesterday Sam gave a talk about the new Galaxy UI, and on the heels of improving the communication between users and developers, people are becoming more computationally savvy. When Galaxy started 20 years ago, we didn't all walk around with phones in our pockets, and we're used to it. We see my dad, when he saw the iPhone, and he was in the later stages of his life, I told him it just only has one button. And he says, that's my problem exactly. I don't know, do I have to hit it 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, hold it long, hold it short, whatever. So, but then, iPhone has clearly, or Apple in general, has proven to have done magical things for both users. I mean, for users on both spectrums, the novels and the experts, And so the next topic is how can we grow Galaxy? Some commentary so far indicated that adding simplicity was one way to go about it, by invoking workflows, hopefully helping the reuse and adoption of the platform in general. But any comments, I guess, as we start bridging this gap where people are inherently more computationally savvy?
My only comment would be the first landing point is always best kept as simple as possible. And of course, people are learning more programming. It is true that today, I guess, there are many more users of advanced tools than advanced genome informatics tools than 10 years ago. But if not just Galaxy or Anvil or any project tries to go in the direction of having all of those captured on the landing page, that is scaring away 10 times more users than getting any new users to even play with it for a single day, hopefully coming back at any point. So my thoughts would be, definitely there needs to be room to incorporate more advanced things, but not on the initial landing side.
I would just back that up with, because we're working with very new users always, hey, you should look at Galaxy. And it is easy once you get into it, but that first look at the, there's all this and there's a lot of stuff that I think right away is intimidating. So, and I know there's challenges because it's so distributed, there's Galaxy server gateway instances all over the world. So how to have one entry page to any given server is maybe difficult too, but simplicity, something they're more used to these days. And I guess people are more computationally knowledgeable, but they also have an expectation too of simplicity. If I'm used to just boop, 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 direct me where I'm going kind of. So however that could look in a way that would just pull them in without a sort of shock value at the start, I think would have some value.
It could, and with Anvil, Mike and others have developed what we call personas. So I don't know if some of the ways to have more advanced tools a little closer to the surface, but not in the face of a new user scaring them away, are to have the Galaxy landing page set up. So are you a proteomics scientist looking for Galaxy? Are you a microbiome scientist? To split it up by kind of science rather than tool names or software jargon that would scare away a beginning microbiome data.
Seems like this is the analogy of a ramp versus a ladder kind of works for me here, but I think you don't want the ramp to end at some point either. It seems like we maybe if we, unless we've misinterpreted the data, it seems like there's a good chunk of users who use Galaxy for some period of time and then outgrow it in some way, potentially. I'm not sure if we really know the answer to that question, but I don't really know technically why that would be the case, but maybe it's more social. And I like doing, making sure that more computational, sophisticated users, as people become more computationally sophisticated, they stick around and the tools still work for them. I think that's we can do some work in that space to try to sort of increase the value as time goes on. And maybe just on the phone analogy, I think one of the ways that Apple has been successful in pricing $1,000 piece of hardware that you carry around with your, like I don't actually need $1,000 pieces of hardware with whatever fancy software and hardware in my pocket, but somehow it's become sort of the social norm, and this is acceptable. And I think that maybe as people get more sophisticated with Galaxy, the social norm is like, okay, that's not what sophisticated people use. I think we've been talking about this for years. It's not really a hot take, I don't think, at this point, but maybe there's a way to make that feel more like the branding gets a little bit more toward that sophisticated, high, fancy user kind of thing.
If there's no question, how do you convince the command line and HPC community with a better user interface?
A small part of them will never be convinced. And I'm not sure that putting a huge amount of effort into convincing that part of the user base is a worthwhile investment. But at the same time, increasing sophistication does not, in my mind, automatically have to translate into a complex interface on the initial side. I mean, one might almost say that the more sophisticated we get in terms of our tools on Galaxy, the more we should be able to find simple ways for people to use them. And it's a lot of my work these days is convincing scientists to try the cloud as an option for genomics when they have decades of investment in HPC infrastructure. And we have extremely bright scientists who have dug in and said, I will never use the cloud. And I'm learning that, after a point, there's only so much we can do. So with Galaxy, there will be people that will not use Galaxy, and good for them.
Giuseppe.
Oh.
Thanks. If I may, there was a similar issue 10 years ago with Wikipedia. They changed the interface, the editing interface. There was a lot of debate, but the key concept is something that it's similar to what Wendy told before. It is removing the cognitive overload that a user has to put in something. Because, for example, for Wikipedia, the interface was changed to look more like a word processing software. People already knew how to use that. But there is still the chance to use the old version, the very technical version, so skilled people can still use the old one. Is there something that you think already exists that Galaxy can, the Galaxy interface can be inspired on, or do you think it will be Galaxy to be the trendsetter for the new interfaces, something that people in 5 years, 10 years, they know this is the way to run a workflow or something like this?
Who here has made an undo button? That's step one at all times for being very comfortable with it. Can I have you guys answer that question more in a minute? Because I did want to say one thing previously about this whole question. As users become more computationally knowledgeable, yeah, probably true, but the decision makers probably less so. And sometimes they determine what an organization or group is going to do. So that group is not having the same skyrocketing computational knowledge that I think our user group is. So I would be slightly cautious with assuming this knowledge or skill set in the people that we're targeting.
I think I also want to add a bit of a comment, and also something that I think we should aim towards too, is that we should make the user interface workable for people of different skill sets. And so that means if you don't need to see all the details of a step because you're doing something production grade, then you shouldn't be seeing all the details if you don't want to. And still, we should have the ability to give you all the details, so for the sake of transparency, to give you all the details. So ideally, the concept should always be, okay, the first view is simple. The first view is very intuitive. But if I need to drill down to like what command line was generated, because for whatever reason I need that, then it should always be possible. So I think the driving design should always be as simple as possible, but as complex as necessary. And I think that would help a lot, because I think there are many areas in the user interface where we're not doing that well yet.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I am from the material science community. We are trying to expand Galaxy there. And one of the things our colleagues in the US in Oak Ridge have done is they have adapted the Galaxy interface, the standard one, to look like the graphical user interfaces of the desktop-based software tools that people use to do their analysis. So by doing that, the users can use a piece of software that has a graphical user interface that looks like the one they were using, but they have the workflow management capabilities of Galaxy. So my question is, how popular is this approach within the bioengineering community? Have you tried this? Does it work? Or is it better to stick to the standard graphical user interface and try to convince the users to do it that way?
So in material science, is it the case that a particular way of seeing things on the screen is much more common across locations? Like the reason that this worked for Oak Ridge is it seems like the people all had a unified view of what they like to see on the screen.
Yes, that is the case because there are analysis tools which are popular. I mean, we work in large scale facilities. You have pieces of software that become very popular and they are used pretty much everywhere. So when you do an X-ray experiment, you use this piece of software. So yeah.
And then the success story here is a talented software engineer who was able to take Galaxy and sort of bend it into this view.
Yeah.
With genomics, I shouldn't speak for the field as a whole, but chances are that outside of things like genome browsers, a few things would match that description. But my hunch would be that the vast variety of things that people do in genomics means that there is not such a unified view of what I want to see on my screen. It would be very different from an MD looking for variants in a patient to a invertebrate genomics person looking for structural variants. So it would be many things to many people, and a much harder job to do relative to what I hear has been done for you.
I think this bundles a little bit of an answer to Giuseppe's question about reusing technologies or interfaces that people know. And Bernice gave a talk as well a couple of days ago about another example of what Oak Ridge did. So I mean, I'm not a panel member, but I'll express my opinion. I think it's coming. But no, there's a question on here on Menti that relates to some of this, maybe to Helge's point. And it says, should we talk about Galaxy less as a collection of cores memory and turn the narrative into time to result gains through Galaxy user, right? So, because you know, if you're a command line user, you oftentimes cite it's faster. But so this kind of time to result. There are also some other examples that I've heard over the past couple of days saying that Galaxy was faster in its time to result than quite a few other workflow managers. So any comments on that?
I'm going to jump in here and actually address a bit more of your question as well, because I think this is brilliant. And I also think that my way in when I'm talking to bioinformaticians or I'm talking to people who love their command line, my way in is not use Galaxy because like we discussed, there is that friction. But the way I get in there is I go with how many people are using your facilities? How many users do you interact with? How many biologists data are you analyzing? Cool. And how many emails do you get from them? And how many requests for help do you get from them? And how often does it break? And so you start asking these questions of all of these things that really takes that time away from them. You know, at one point I even did an exercise where I made all of these people who had incidentally, before I walked into this institute, informed me they had no issues whatsoever with their bioinformatics and would never need any assistance with this. Well, they had perfect communication across all of the disciplines, no issues. So I'd walked in and I made them do an exercise where they had to like rank what the activities they were doing in their workday. And unsurprisingly, meetings was at the top. But, you know, if you think about exciting technical people, what do you want to do? You want to make cool stuff, right? So right at the bottom of what their time distribution was making cool stuff. It was inevitably answering emails, responding to user issues, applying the analysis that already exists. Like it was doing these lower level things that Galaxy itself could do for those users. So then not only are you getting time to result with Galaxy, you're getting time saved by the person who's not having to do everyone's analysis for them. You're getting time saved from not having to deal with all those queries and all of those problems. So I think that's a nice pitch into those communities as well.
I could add to that for the communities that we're trying to push into this. I think the word that I use related to this question is the scalability issue, because many of the users, you know, doing biological mass spectrometry, they're running stuff on their laptop in their lab. There's a whole slew of new instrumentation coming out, which has, you know, by an order of magnitude increased the volume of data that people are having to deal with. There are much more interesting applications, which are much more memory processor intensive. So one selling point for sure is, hey, if you do this in Galaxy, we can put this onto scalable infrastructure. And it's not even about like, is it faster? It's more about, can you even make it work? And so I think there's a place there to pull people in. What we haven't really done, and I would like to for like the proteomics community, is we need a big wow kind of paper that really shows, hey, if you want to do this type of analysis, you're not going to be able to do it anywhere else. But if you come to Galaxy, here it is, and it works, and you can access it, and away you go. We put out a review earlier this year on tools in Galaxy for proteomics, which is great. We've got all kinds of papers showing how you can use it, but something that really sort of capitalizes on some of the things Galaxy can do that other things can't, I think could really also kind of suddenly have people really turning to it in a real way.
Maybe I'll add just to spice it up a little bit. And I think I don't agree with this statement. I think Galaxy, from a raw execution standpoint, is probably significantly worse than other workflow languages in terms of your ability to pipeline and make things work. But I also don't care about that much. You know, exactly how many times we've copied the data sets. Probably Galaxy is a little worse on that front. But I think that a really important time to result, and maybe this is what was meant by this question, is the time from I need to do an analysis to I have a working workflow and a result at the end of that workflow. I suspect that would be significantly faster if done by a person with expertise in Galaxy versus a person with similar expertise in another workflow environment. I don't know, maybe fight me later if at the coffee break or something if you disagree. It'd be kind of fun.
Hi. About how to make people use Galaxy. regarding what has been done, for example, mentioned for mass spectrometry or things like that. What I see also is that there are some people that would not use Galaxy just because they already have something that is working more or less, maybe sometimes less than more, but they manage. So they do not see why they would go to do something else since they already kind of know how to do something. But as I see it, there is the all open science question that is very, very topical, but in some fields that may not still be so much topical for researchers. So maybe Galaxy could focus in a way in communicating about how this mandatory thing, open science things that researchers are not comfortable with will be needed for future studies, for future research, and that maybe it's not about, sometimes at least, about being able to do something to produce results, but being able to do it in the way that the future asks you to do it, with all the fair question, etc. I know it's quite difficult to talk about this with researchers, in particular old researchers, let's say. But maybe that's a way to promote without having to explain why they should change because they managed before.
I think that's an excellent point. My mind goes back to about 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago. NIH, the NIH director, Francis Collins, at the time, he really made it clear that money going out through NIH for US researchers needed to come with a heavy responsibility for reproducibility. So for a few years, and this doesn't connect to Galaxy immediately, but I'll try to draw a thread from your question to what I'm saying. That and in the years since Dr. Collins has retired and we have a new director, and reproducibility is still important, but if it was getting talked about 10 times a day in 2017, it gets talked about 5 times a day now. So, but I think this is the responsibility of the national science funding agencies to say whatever tools you use for the money you got from us, we want to make sure that you have something that is reproducible. And at the same time, Galaxy would be highlighting the fact that Galaxy was built around reproducible research. So if one of those somewhat senior, people that just refuses to use it because their lab has done it a certain way for 50 years, at some point, hopefully a reviewer latches onto that and says, why is this group not using this other tool that has been shown by the community to be more reproducible than what they have? It is a very hard topic. It takes change at the almost at the National Science Administration level. Not one meeting, not one community. This is a much, much bigger problem than I think Galaxy alone will ever be able to tackle.
I just add to that. I mean, I think that's one of the features of Galaxy that we've always really tried to push is it's so unique that like when we publish our papers, we point them right to the history, the workflow, and it's so transparent. And hey, you can go hit run and rerun this with your own data or see exactly what we did. But I think it does need to start at like the funding level down to like the journals. You know, they talk about, oh, we got to post the reproducibility. They talk a lot about it, but and yes, we have to put, you know, there's things like PRIDE and proteome exchange where you put your data and you put metadata and you try to give enough detail that somebody could redo these things. But in practice, is somebody going to really piece all that together and reconstruct what you did? I doubt it. So I think Galaxy has a huge, you know, opportunity there, but there has to be more, I guess, requirement of truly reproducible analysis. And then maybe people would be forced to look at it more even.
One more thought on that topic is I think this is about culture. And one of the things I love about genomics and sort of that aspect of sort of the area I work in is that the culture is in sharing and reproducibility. That's sort of the standard, the accepted norm. There are maybe outliers. There are other communities where that's less true. And I don't really understand exactly how that happens. Maybe others have thoughts on that, but let's do whatever we can to sort of encourage that kind of sharing culture, that we value the creativity, the asking of questions that you don't know the answers to, trying to find ways to celebrate when you share data and appreciate when people do that. I guess that's opportunities maybe in other areas where people are bringing Galaxy, and we can sort of communicate about that clearly.
Folks, I'm going to move us on again. We are not even halfway through the list of questions that were prepared, and we got 10 minutes or so left. And given where we are, I would really like to cover this particular one because it can influence where we go from here, right? So we're here at GCC, right? This is the 14th consecutive GCC, and for the most part, it's flip-flopped between the United States and Europe. Last year, we had an exception of being invited and taking the invitation wholeheartedly to Australia. And it's the one annual event where, say, the Galaxy meets, right? It's an opportunity. We have a lot of micro communities. We have a lot of regional communities. We have a lot of sub-communities. But this is the one place in a year that the Galaxy meets. However, we want to be inclusive. We want to promote people's opportunities to participate and have their voice heard. And there's realities, right? There's time constraints, there are financial constraints. And so it would be interesting to explore, or at least talk about options of how we can include or promote sort of a more opportune way for people to attend GCC. And so, one idea just to float out there to seed the conversation is to potentially consider having flip-flopping. So 1 year having a single global event, and 1 year having multiple regional events, for example. So we would meet collectively every other year, and regional communities would meet, every other year again on the off years. But it would, lower those costs. It would allow people that just don't have the time investment to maybe come to a shorter meeting or spend less time traveling. The other thing that might promote people to come to a GCC is to raise its academic profile, right? Again, most of us here are academics, and CV has a lot of weight. And so, is there something we can do to make it worthwhile to spend, a month preparing for GCC, take a week out of your life, out of your year, to attend GCC because you feel like you're getting more in return? So,
yeah, Ines, so I handle a large number of meeting and conference grants. Over the years, I've developed a few philosophies, if you will. So with GCC, I would really start by taking the money out of your mind, sitting down, doing a blue sky idea. Like, if money was not an object, how would the Galaxy community design an event that was bringing together as many people as possible every year? Map it out. Is it one big meeting with separate satellite meetings for smaller communities? Is it a mix of virtual for people that will just not be able to travel, coupled with in-person? Just use the drawing board, map out the GCC of your dreams for 2025. Then, coming back to science administrators, myself, whoever on the European side, Australian side, take it back and said, here's what we have in mind. How much are you willing to put into this? What parts of this fit with what you will be willing to fund? The NHGRI piece will be genomics. NIH has something called the Office of Data Science, which would say if there's Galaxy side event for fundamentals of data science, we'll put in 50,000. So then draw out the blue sky plan, come back and work with science administrators to see how much money can be gathered from different pieces. Then you have a way of saying, okay, here's what we have in terms of the support, and here's what we wanted to do. Now let's pull it all together, try to make something that's as big as possible, but also pragmatic. And then you have other constraints, like how many people on the Galaxy side can commit to the organizational challenges, planning meetings, logistics, that. But I really see no reason to not start with opening your mind to the fullest possible level, particularly for a tool like this, for a community.
I would like to jump in on the word hybrid. I think it's really worth to invest some time and money into better hybrid formats. I was once in Hamburg on a conference, and they had a really decent hybrid conference technology. Like, they had screens on the stage for the panel people who were not able to attend physically, and you could still like see them on the stage, and it was like it was much better than just a Zoom meeting or something. It was really, you had the feeling that people are almost there. And I think with more technology, you could really save a lot of travel costs and also convince people who don't have the time to travel a whole week to GCC.
I'd like to talk about the regional idea as well. Like in an ideal world, or if you look at the slide that shows our structure, the image you might get if you're not in the community is that all the locations within Galaxy are equally represented in every working group, every community, at every level. And that's not the case, right? There is big skews in different groups for different regions. And I know how incredibly valuable it was for me at my first GCC to go and discover, like, you're sat right in front of me, so I'm going to point at you, discover your team existed. That was a thing that happened within Galaxy, having been so much on the user side, and how difficult it is to understand how this community functions and how valuable it was to be able to see all of these different people when we do have this regional skew into different regions within Galaxy. I was much more familiar with what the Europeans were doing. So I would be less keen on the regional and more keen on the global, for just thinking how incredibly valuable that was for me, and then how incredibly valuable it was to bring my students along and to show them all of these different people from all of these different places and what those different working groups did to put faces to those people, which, you know, we've spent probably way too much time talking about how important cross-disciplinary communication is. To then have those disciplines represented, I think is critical.
So I want to echo that. I think that's really key. And I don't think we tried, I think a couple, maybe 5 years ago, we did something at I think it was Reed College, where we had sort of bridging the sort of divide between more biomatic, the BOSC group of people, sort of open source bioinformatics, and Galaxy doing a co-conference. I'm not sure that worked really awesome. It was definitely good, but it didn't, I didn't find that it seemed like there were two tracks. There was a BOSC track and a Galaxy track, and they kind of separated, and I don't know. I feel like there was maybe some opportunities there that we didn't capitalize on in terms of connecting people. And I'd love to see that happen more, bringing in people, pairing them up, developers with, like software developers with people who are using the tools to do science, kind of building more of those relationships, engineering the structure of the conference in such a way we can do that. Maybe that's a different kind of regionality, like science regions as opposed to geographic regions, but I think that would be a fun way to make things work too.
I mean, maybe I know we've had some discussions about this, but maybe the other way to look at it is, you know, different venues, conferences for different audiences. You know, I think there is value in this global conference for, you know, those who are really invested more probably on the computational side in Galaxy, of learning the new developments and how do I, administrate my Galaxy instance and those. But when it comes to like novice new users, it maybe is these online training events. I mean, I know of in our sort of domain, there's some software packages that are heavily used, and they have, you know, every spring they have their training event where they do it in person and they bring people in. So is there like a separate user training event or something like that? And maybe it's not in person, maybe that's online, maybe it's both. I don't know, but it's another way to think of it.
So yeah, the smorgasbord is amazing for that with the online training. I think I get slightly cautious with that purely because knowledge exchange is what we're meant to be doing. And knowledge exchange is two ways. But training, when we think about it, is very much one way. It's we're giving this to you guys, take that training, take that resource, go. And I think when we can incentivize people to come and learn, you know, I gave a shout out to John Tilton this week because this was the first conference I was able to follow some of the back end talks, right? It was brilliant. And I think there was a lot of value in that. And I think if we can incentivize users to come to the more computational talks, and by extension, the more computationally focused people to come to more of the user talks, I think there's a huge value with that. And that is how you create knowledge exchange. And that is how you can therefore follow these impact case studies that we're so worried about, trying to get these stories of what people are doing. they'll do that if they know you and they've had a conversation with you and they've shared a meal with you and they are invested enough to then tell you what they go and do. So, but I mean, I would say that because I'm not a computational person.
Opportunity for one last question or comment. We're running up against time. Going once. Going twice. We're done. So thank you very much to all the panelists. You, of course, for participating, engaging. Hopefully, this was worthwhile and gives us something to sort of start thinking about, talking about, and ultimately implementing, and then seeing where we stand maybe a year from now. So, thank you again.